Jordan Hayes was 31 years old, and for 6 months, he did one thing every single Sunday morning without fail. He updated a spreadsheet. Every dollar accounted for, every unnecessary expense cut, every overtime hour quietly converted into a number that kept climbing toward something that mattered. He was a field operations supervisor, not flashy, not wealthy, but disciplined in a way most men never learn to be. He had been with Tanya for 3 years. He believed in her completely. So he saved, and saved, and saved, until the night he walked into that restaurant with a ring in his pocket and everything he had to offer in his chest. He got down on one knee, and Tanya looked at that ring, looked at him, and said the one word that would cost her everything she had not yet realized she was about to lose. She called him broke and walked out the door. 2 years later, Jordan was on one knee again. Same ring hand, different woman, and this time it was Tanya's best friend saying yes. What happened in between those two moments is a story Tanya will spend the rest of her life wishing she could undo. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm was set for 5:50. Jordan was already up at 5:47. He did not bounce out of bed. He did not spring into action like a man in a commercial. He simply opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling for 3 seconds, and got up the way he did every morning, with the quiet, unhurried certainty of someone who had already decided the night before exactly how the day would go. The apartment was small, but it was clean. Not just wiped down clean, organized clean. Everything had a place, and everything was in it. The books on the shelf stood straight. The kitchen counter held only what belonged there: a coffee maker, a wooden cutting board, a single ceramic bowl. The floor near the door had one mat, one pair of shoes, perfectly parallel. Visitors did not always notice these details consciously, but they always felt them. There was a steadiness to the space that felt like the man who lived in it. Jordan made his coffee strong and sat at the small table by the window while his laptop opened. Outside, the street was still mostly dark. A delivery truck rolled past. A dog barked once and went quiet. The city was just beginning to wake up, and Jordan was already ahead of it. He opened the spreadsheet. It was not complicated. A single sheet with 2 columns, in and out, and a running total at the bottom that he updated every Sunday morning without fail. He had started it 6 months ago. Nobody knew about it except Aunt Cora, and only because she had called on the 3rd Sunday by accident, and he had been honest with her when she asked what he was working on. She hadn't said much. She rarely did when something mattered. He updated the total. He looked at the number for a moment. Then he closed the laptop and finished his coffee. At work, Jordan moved through the warehouse floor the way water moves through a pipe. Efficient, purposeful, taking the exact shape the situation required. His crew of 14 men respected him in the way that real respect happens, not because someone told them to, but because he had earned it through 18 months of showing up early, explaining his decisions, and never once throwing a subordinate under the bus to make himself look better to management. His warehouse manager, a heavy-set man named Clifton, who had been in logistics for 22 years, had said to a colleague 6 months ago that Jordan was the best floor supervisor he had worked with. He had not said it to Jordan directly. Jordan found out through someone else. He filed that away too. He was good at filing things away. It was a skill that looked like patience from the outside, and it was, but it was also something more than that. It was the instinct of a man who understood that information collected quietly was worth more than information announced loudly. Tanya had come over on Thursday. She came over less than she used to. Jordan noticed. He did not say anything about it yet, because he was not the kind of man who reacted to patterns before he was certain they were patterns. He observed. He waited. He made sure he was seeing what he was actually seeing. On Thursday, she had stood in his kitchen and looked around with an expression that was not quite discomfort, but was not quite ease either, like a woman sitting in a chair that was technically fine, but not exactly to her taste. She had picked up a mug, turned it over in her hands, set it back down. She was wearing an outfit that cost more than Jordan's monthly grocery budget, and she wore it the way she wore expensive things, like it was simply the minimum standard for being dressed. They had eaten dinner together at the small table. Jordan had cooked. The food was good. Halfway through the meal, Tanya had looked up from her plate and said, "Victor got a new car. That black Range Rover, the one with the—" and then described it in detail that suggested she had spent more than a passing moment looking at it. Jordan had nodded and asked a neutral question about her day. She had answered. The evening moved on. Later, washing dishes while she scrolled on the couch behind him, he had heard her mention Victor's car again in the context of a completely different story. He had kept washing the dishes. He filed it away. After work, he opened his sock drawer. The ring box was still there. It was small and dark blue and fit in his palm without any drama. He opened it once, looked at the ring. Simple, clean, a single stone. The kind of thing a man bought when he had saved carefully and chosen with intention rather than impulse, then closed it and put it back. He picked up his phone and called Aunt Cora. She answered on the second ring the way she always did. They talked about small things first. Her neighbor's ongoing war with a raccoon, whether Jordan was eating enough vegetables, a book she had finished that she thought he should read. Then he mentioned the dinner reservation tonight. 3 weeks he'd been holding it. The line went quiet, not an empty quiet. The particular quiet of a woman who had something to say and was choosing whether to say it. Jordan knew that quiet well. He had grown up with it. He did not press her. He said, "I'll call you tomorrow, Aunt Cora." She said, "Okay, baby." Her voice was careful, soft around the edges in a way it sometimes got when she was feeling something she wasn't ready to name. He set the phone down. He took the ring box from the drawer and placed it on top of the dresser. Then he stood in front of the small mirror above it and straightened his tie, a deep navy, the one he had bought for his last big job interview, and kept for occasions that deserved it. He looked at himself for a moment, not in vanity, in the way a man checks himself before he walks into something important, making sure everything is in order, that nothing has been left undone. He picked up his keys, left the ring box on the dresser, and walked out the door. The restaurant was called Linden's. It was not a place that tried too hard. Dark wood tables, warm lighting, a menu that changed with the season. The kind of place where the food was the point and the atmosphere followed naturally from that. Jordan had driven past it 6 months ago, looked it up, made a mental note, and called for a reservation 3 weeks back when he decided the time was right. He did not choose restaurants by reputation or price. He chose them the way he chose most things, by paying attention and then deciding deliberately. He arrived 7 minutes early. Tanya was already there. She was seated at the table by the window, the one he had specifically requested, and she was looking at her phone when he walked in. She glanced up, smiled, went back to the phone for another few seconds before setting it face down on the table. It was a small thing. He noticed it the way he noticed most small things, without expression, without reaction. He filed it. "Hey, baby." She leaned up for a kiss when he reached the table. She smelled expensive. Her hair was done, and her earrings caught the light. "Hey." He sat down. "You look nice." "Thank you." She glanced around the room once, briefly, the way a person does when they are cataloging a space against some internal standard. "It's cute," she said. The word was light, casual, but it landed in a specific way, the same way a small stone lands in still water. Not dramatic, just present. Jordan opened his menu. They ordered. The food came out right, seasoned properly, plated cleanly. Jordan ate with genuine appreciation. Tanya picked at hers in the way she sometimes did, not because the food wasn't good, but because eating fully at restaurants was something she had decided didn't align with a certain image she held of herself. He had noticed this over 3 years, without ever saying anything about it. The conversation moved. Work. A mutual friend's recent move to Atlanta. The weather turning. Normal things. But underneath the normal things, something in the evening felt slightly off-center. The way a table feels when one leg is just a millimeter shorter than the others. Stable enough to use, but impossible to fully ignore. Tanya checked her phone twice. Not urgently, just checked it. The second time, Jordan set down his fork. He reached into his jacket pocket. The box was small and dark blue, the same one that had been in his sock drawer for 6 months and on his dresser for the last 4 hours. He set it on the table between them without ceremony. No bended knee, not yet. Just placed it there, in the light, like a fact. Tanya looked at it. Her expression did not do what he had imagined it might do, across the months of careful saving and quiet planning. There was no intake of breath, no hand over the mouth. There was a stillness, a particular kind of stillness that he would understand later, when the whole picture came into focus. She opened the box. She looked at the ring for a long moment. Then she looked at Jordan. Jordan. Her voice was patient, almost gentle. The tone of someone delivering a correction they have been holding for some time. Baby. He waited. You saved up for 6 months, she said. And this is what broke looks like trying to be romantic. The ambient noise of the restaurant continued without interruption. Silverware against plates. Quiet conversation from nearby tables. A woman at the bar laughing at something. The world kept moving at its normal pace, completely indifferent to what had just been said. Jordan did not move. I love you, Tanya continued, and she said it the way people say things they have already filed away in the past tense. But I can't build a life on potential. I need someone who is already there. She paused. You're a good man. I just need a different kind of good. She closed the ring box. She set it back down on the table gently, like she was being careful with something fragile. Then she picked up her purse, placed her napkin on the table beside her barely touched plate, and stood up. She left without raising her voice, without a scene. She walked out through the front door, and the warm light of Linden's closed behind her, and Jordan sat at the table by the window alone. He sat there for a while. The server came by, professional and kind, and asked if everything was all right. Jordan said yes and asked for the check. He paid it. He left a full tip. He picked up the ring box, put it back in his jacket pocket, walked to his car, and drove home. He did not turn on the radio. The apartment was exactly as he had left it. Everything in its place. The ceiling light in the bedroom was still off. He did not turn it on. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a few minutes, still in his good jacket and his navy tie, holding the ring box in both hands. Then he stood up. He opened the sock drawer. He placed the ring box inside and slid the drawer shut. He sat at the small table by the window. He opened his laptop. He found the savings spreadsheet. 6 months of careful, quiet work. Every Sunday updated without fail. And he closed it. He opened a new blank document. He sat there in the dark and the silence, the cursor blinking on the empty page. And after a long moment, he began to type. The jacket had been hanging on his closet door since Tuesday. It was a caramel-colored blazer, expensive, the kind of thing Tanya bought herself on principle. She had left it after the last time she stayed over, 3 weeks ago, maybe longer. Jordan had noticed it every morning when he got dressed, and had not touched it. Now, 3 days after Linden's, he took it off the hook, folded it over his arm, and drove to her building. He was not going to knock on her door. He had no desire to see her, and nothing left to say. His plan was to leave the jacket with the front desk and drive home. Simple. Clean. The way he preferred things. The lobby of her building was a small carpeted space with a security desk and a set of elevators that took too long. Jordan had been inside it maybe 30 times over 3 years. He knew the afternoon doorman by face, if not by name. He was almost to the desk when the elevator opened and a woman stepped out. Mid-20s, lanyard around her neck, work bag over one shoulder, clearly headed somewhere with intention. He recognized her vaguely. One of Tanya's colleagues. They had met at some work event, a rooftop thing last summer, briefly. She recognized him at the same moment. "Jordan." "Hey." She smiled, easy and familiar. "Visiting Tanya?" "Just dropping something off." He held up the jacket slightly. "Oh, nice." She shifted her bag. "Tell her I said hey. And tell her I hope everything is okay." She seemed kind of stressed this week. She said it the way people say things that are observation rather than concern, already moving toward the door. Jordan kept his voice neutral. "Stressed about what?" The woman paused, tilted her head slightly. Something in the way she looked at him shifted. A small recalibration, like she was deciding something. "Oh, just the thing with her brother, I think." She shrugged. She and Reggie were going back and forth about something. I only caught part of it. A brief pause. "He had pulled your LinkedIn. Was running your numbers through one of those salary benchmark tools. Industry comparisons, that kind of thing." She said it casually, the way people relay gossip that they have already mentally filed as harmless. She mentioned it a couple times over the last few months. Jordan said nothing. The woman seemed to hear the silence a half-second late. Something crossed her face. The specific discomfort of a person who has just realized they have handed someone a live wire. "Anyway," she started. "Thank you," Jordan said simply. She nodded once, uncertain, and pushed through the door. Jordan stood in the lobby for a moment. Then he walked to the front desk, left the jacket with a note that said, "Only Tanya's, left at mine," and walked back to his car. He sat in the parking lot for a while. Not long, but a while. What he was doing, he understood, was allowing himself to hold the complete picture now that all the pieces were finally in place. The two mentions of Victor's car at dinner, the way she had stopped staying over, the particular stillness on her face when she saw the ring. Not surprise, not hesitation, but the stillness of a person confirming a conclusion they had already reached. She had known before they sat down at Lyndon's. She had known before he made the reservation. She and her brother had been running the numbers for months, comparing his salary to some benchmark she had constructed in her mind. And the ring had not been a surprise or a disappointment. It had simply been the last piece of evidence in a case she had already decided. The humiliation at the restaurant had not been impulsive. It had been deliberate, calm. The verdict of a woman who had made up her mind quietly and waited for the right moment to read it aloud. Jordan started the car and drove home. Inside, he made coffee he didn't particularly need and sat at his table with his laptop. He pulled up the supply chain management certification program he had bookmarked 11 months ago and talked himself out of 4 times since. 240 hours. Online, self-paced. Recognized by every major logistics employer in the country. He had told himself he'd register when things settled down. He registered. Then he opened a separate tab and pulled up apartment listings in Birchfield, a neighborhood 1 mile east of his current one. Slightly newer buildings, quieter streets. He had avoided looking seriously because the rents were marginally higher, and he had been keeping that money somewhere else. That somewhere else no longer existed. He found 3 listings in his range. He saved all 3. Then he called Aunt Cora. She picked up on the second ring. He told her everything. The dinner, the ring, the lobby just now, the colleague, all of it. He told it in the same order it happened, with the same economy of language he used for everything. He did not editorialize. He did not perform pain for her benefit. He simply told her what was true. She listened without interrupting. Not once. When he finished, there was a brief silence. Then she said, She showed you who she was. The only question is what you do with what you know. Jordan was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. Good, said Aunt Cora. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. Her garden, a neighbor's new dog, the weather turning cold. Then they said good night. Jordan transferred the deposit on the second apartment he had saved. He closed the laptop. He went to bed at 9:43, earlier than usual, and he lay in the dark with his hands folded on his chest, eyes open for just a little while, and then closed, not sad, recalibrated. The library on Saturday mornings was one of Jordan's oldest habits. He had started coming here in his mid-20s, back when his apartment had been too small and too loud, with a neighbor who kept a television on at full volume through the wall. He had needed a quiet place to think, and the library was free, and the chairs near the back windows were comfortable if you arrived before 9. He had kept coming long after he moved. It was just part of how his Saturdays were shaped. Tanya had called it boring every time he mentioned it. Not cruelly, just the casual dismissal of something she did not understand and did not try to. He had stopped mentioning it. He arrived at 8:52. He signed in, got his usual table in the back corner. 4 seats, good light, far enough from the children's section that the noise was manageable, and spread his certification materials out, with the methodical care of a man setting up a workstation. Study guide on the left, printed practice modules in the center, a legal pad and 2 pens on the right, 1 blue and 1 black. His coffee in a sealed travel mug set on the floor beside his chair. He opened to Chapter 4 and got to work. He was 40 minutes in when he heard the chair. Not the sound of someone sitting down, the sound of a chair being pulled out with a foot. The clumsy, efficient motion of someone whose hands were completely occupied. He looked up. Dana Washington was setting a stack of law books on the table across from him. The stack was significant. She had them balanced against her chest with her chin resting on the top spine to keep them steady, and she was lowering them with the focused caution of someone diffusing something. When they landed flat on the table, she exhaled, looked up, and saw Jordan. They both went still. It was maybe 2 seconds, long enough to feel it, short enough that neither of them had to decide what to do with it because Dana reached down, picked up the top book from the stack, and held it up with both hands, plain and simple, like a caption. Bar exam, she said. Jordan held up his study guide. Supply chain. She nodded once. He nodded once. They both looked back down at their materials. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. That was the first thing Jordan noticed. It did not have the specific tension of 2 people pretending to ignore each other. It was just 2 people working in the same space, which was the only thing either of them had come here to do. He worked through Chapter 4. She worked through something with yellow tabs and margin notes so dense they were practically a second document. Outside the tall windows, the morning moved from early to mid. Someone's child was reading aloud near the front. A library cart squeaked past on the other side of the shelves. Jordan was in the middle of a practice problem about freight classification when something slid across the table. He looked up. Dana was already looking back at her book. She had pushed a granola bar, still in the wrapper, oats and honey, the kind from the vending machine near the entrance, to the edge of his side of the table. She did not look up again. She did not explain it. He looked at the granola bar. He looked at her. She turned a page. He picked it up and ate it. They left at the same time, which was not planned. They simply both reached stopping points within minutes of each other, packed up with the parallel efficiency of people who had been doing this kind of thing long enough to do it without ceremony. They walked out through the main doors and into the cool November morning, and somehow, without either of them deciding to, they were walking to the parking lot at the same pace. They talked easily, not about anything that mattered. The air conditioning inside the library, which ran cold even in November, for reasons nobody could explain. Whether the certification was worth the $240 in study hours, Dana thought probably yes, Jordan was reserving judgment. The parking situation on this block, which had gotten worse since the new coffee shop opened on the corner. It was the kind of conversation that costs nothing and asks nothing. Jordan had forgotten, briefly, that it was possible to talk to someone that way. They reached the point where the lot split toward two different rows of cars. Dana stopped walking. She looked at the ground for just a moment, the look of someone choosing words rather than running out of them. For what it's worth, what she said wasn't okay. She said it to the pavement first, then looked up at him. Nobody deserves that. She did not wait for him to respond. She turned, walked to her car, and got in. Jordan sat in his car for a few minutes without starting the engine. He was not thinking about Tanya. He was not thinking about the restaurant, or the ring, or the lobby 3 weeks ago. He was mostly just sitting, which was something he rarely allowed himself to do without a reason. He drove home, made lunch, reviewed his practice modules for another hour. Then he called Aunt Cora. They talked about the certification first. She asked good questions, the kind that required real answers, and he found himself explaining the material more clearly than he had expected to. Then the conversation loosened the way it did when neither of them was in a hurry, and somewhere in the middle of it, without particular weight, he mentioned that Dana Washington had been at the library. Aunt Cora went quiet. Jordan recognized the silence immediately. It was the same one from the phone call the night he told her about the ring. The silence that meant she had something to say and was choosing her words. This time, he asked, "What are you thinking?" Aunt Cora was quiet for one more beat. Then she said, "Keep studying." Jordan almost smiled. "That's all." "That's plenty," she said. The coffee shop they had landed on was not the closest one to either of them. It was not the most convenient, not the cheapest, not the one with the fastest service. It was the one with the corner booth by the window that fit 2 people and a spread of work materials without feeling crowded. And it was the one where the counter staff had stopped asking for their names for the cups, because they already knew them. This was the 4th time. Jordan had ordered first, black coffee, no argument. Dana had ordered a cortado with an extra shot and a glass of water, which the barista had already started making before she finished asking. They had taken the corner booth without discussing it and spread out their things with the same unconscious efficiency they had first discovered at the library 6 months ago. 2 people who worked the same way, finding each other's rhythm without effort. Dana was reviewing a motion response. Jordan was working through a logistics framework for a regional audit his company had scheduled for the following month. Between them on the table, 2 drinks, 1 shared set of napkins, and a comfortable silence that neither of them had to maintain. That was the thing about it. The silence didn't need any work. "This opposing counsel writes like he's being paid by the word," Dana said, without looking up. Jordan glanced over. "Is he?" "Probably." She made a note in the margin, swift and exact. 42 pages, for something that should be 12. Some people think more words make a stronger argument. Some people are wrong. She turned the page. Jordan smiled at his laptop screen and said nothing. The certification had come through in March. 9 months of study, 4 practice exams, 1 real one. He had passed with a score he had not expected to mention to anyone, and had mentioned to no one except Aunt Cora, who had asked for the number specifically and then repeated it back to him like she was recording it somewhere. The promotion had followed in June. Not immediately. There had been an interview process, 2 rounds, a panel that included the regional VP he would eventually be reporting to. Jordan had prepared for it the same way he prepared for everything, thoroughly and without performance. He had brought documentation of every metric from the past 2 years of his operations record. He had answered every question directly, without embellishment, without hedging. The regional VP had called him the following week. The offer was better than he had anticipated. He had not accepted it on the call. He had thanked them, asked for 48 hours, and spent those 48 hours reviewing the full compensation structure, the scope of responsibility, and the advancement timeline with the same careful attention he gave every contract. Then he had called back and asked for $12,000 more than the initial offer. They had countered at $8,000. He had taken it. His new apartment was the two-bedroom he had been tracking for months. Same neighborhood he had moved to after the breakup. One better block. A home office that was just a spare room with a door and good light, but that was enough. He had furnished it slowly and deliberately. Nothing on credit. Nothing decorative that he hadn't chosen himself. The watch was the last thing. A simple steel watch with a clean face and a date window. Nothing extravagant, nothing that announced itself. He had picked it up on a Saturday afternoon in August, tried it on, and bought it without deliberating. He wore it every day. When people asked if it was new, he told them yes, and moved the conversation forward. He had earned it. That was the whole story. Dana had passed the bar on her first attempt. She had called him when the results posted. Not from excitement, or not only from that. She had sounded like someone who had been holding their breath for a long time and had finally, carefully, let it out. He had been in the parking lot of his office when his phone buzzed, and he had sat on the hood of his car in the afternoon heat and talked to her for 20 minutes. She had started at the boutique firm in September. Civil litigation, some commercial work, the kind of environment where you were handed real files and expected to carry them. She was finishing her MBA at night, 2 classes a semester, the same way she had done everything, one careful, committed step at a time. Their texts had become calls somewhere around month 3. The calls had become coffee at month 5. The coffee, this booth, these particular rhythms, had become a thing they did twice a month, then 3 times, then whenever the week allowed. Neither of them had named it. On this particular afternoon, Jordan finished the section he was working on and leaned back for a moment. Dana was still reading, her pen moving in small focused strokes, one elbow on the table and her chin resting in her hand. The afternoon light came through the window at a low angle and settled across the table between them. He looked at her. She looked up. Neither of them looked away. The coffee shop made its ordinary sounds around them. Someone ordered at the counter. A chair scraped the floor 2 tables over. Jordan and Dana held each other's eyes in the easy, unhurried way of 2 people who already knew, and neither of them said a word. The botanical garden was a 30-minute drive from their apartment, and Jordan made it in 25. Not because he was rushing, because the morning had gone smoothly, and the roads were clear, and sometimes things just line up. He parked and sat in the car for exactly 1 minute. Not nervous, just present. The garden was doing everything October could do. The maples along the main path had gone the deep, urgent red that only lasts about 2 weeks before the wind takes it. The ginkgo trees were pure yellow, the kind of yellow that looks lit from inside. The air was cool without being cold, and the afternoon light came in low and golden the way autumn light always does, like the sun is taking its time on the way down, like it knows the days are getting short, and it is making each hour count. Jordan walked the familiar path slowly. This was the garden he and Dana had visited on their 3rd date. She had mentioned it once, early in their friendship. Just a passing comment, almost nothing. I always meant to go. Never made the time. He had remembered it the way he remembered most things, quietly, completely, without effort. So he had suggested it. She had lit up in a way she tried to keep contained and did not quite manage. They had walked the whole thing that afternoon. 2 people who were still pretending they were just friends, pointing at plants they couldn't name, and making each other laugh at nothing in particular. She had stopped on the stone bridge to look down at the water garden below, and he had stood next to her and understood, very clearly, that he was in trouble. Today he walked the same path alone, arriving ahead of her. He had told her. That was the part that felt exactly right. There had been no elaborate concealment, no misdirection. One evening, maybe 6 weeks ago, he had looked across the kitchen table at her and said, simply, "I've been thinking about asking you to marry me." She had looked up from her laptop. "I've been thinking about you asking, too." He had smiled. "When will you know you're ready?" She had held his eyes for a moment. "Jordan, I already am." So this afternoon was not a question. It was a confirmation. A ceremony of something they had both already chosen, held in the place where he had first understood what she meant to him. He stood at the stone bridge now, facing the water garden. The koi moved slow and orange beneath the surface. The reflection of the trees shimmered in the water, all that red and gold, broken up and rearranged. A pair of ducks moved through the far end without urgency. He heard her footsteps on the path behind him. Dana was wearing a burnt orange coat he had not seen before. She had her hair down. She was smiling before she even reached the bridge, the kind of smile that had already started somewhere back on the path. "You're early," she said. "I'm always early." "That's true." She came to stand beside him, looked out at the water. "It's prettier than I remembered." "Yeah," he said. But he wasn't looking at the water. She caught him looking. The smile changed into something quieter and more certain. Jordan reached into his jacket pocket. He turned toward her and went down on one knee on the worn stone of the bridge, and Dana's hands flew up over her mouth before he had finished the first sentence. He told her, in the plain, careful language he used for everything that mattered, that she was the clearest choice he had ever made, that she made him feel like exactly who he was, and that was enough, that he wanted to build something with her, not perform it, not photograph it, just build it, day by day, for as long as they had. He asked her to marry him. She said yes before the question finished forming. He stood up. He held her face in both hands, and she was laughing, and her eyes were wet, and the afternoon light was doing everything he could have hoped for. Gold and warm across the bridge, and the water, and the red and yellow trees behind her. On the elevated walkway above the water garden, Tanya stopped walking. Her friend said something behind her. She did not hear it. She had both hands on the wooden railing. From the walkway, she had a direct, unobstructed view of the stone bridge below. The whole scene, perfectly framed, the way a photograph would frame it. Jordan on one knee, Dana's hands over her mouth, the ring catching the light as it slid onto Dana's finger. She watched Jordan stand up. She watched him hold Dana's face. She watched them together, in the amber October light, close and unhurried, like people who were not performing anything for anyone, like people who were simply, entirely, in the right place. Tanya's friend said something again. A question this time. Tanya did not respond. She stayed at the railing for another moment. Then she turned and walked back the way they had come. She did not take any photographs that afternoon. That evening, her phone rang. Reggie. She stared at his name on the screen for 2 full rings. Then she picked up. "Hey," he said. "How was your day?" "Fine," she said. It was fine. Dana found the old phone in a shoebox. It was buried under a stack of notebooks at the back of her closet. A phone she had replaced 2 years ago and never fully cleared out. She only dug it out because she was looking for a charging cable and found the shoebox instead. She plugged the old phone in out of habit, not expectation. It took 20 minutes to charge enough to power on. She was sitting cross-legged on the bedroom floor, sorting through a box of papers for the wedding guest list, when the old phone finally lit up. Notifications cascaded across the screen, old texts, old emails, old reminders for a life she had moved out of. She was about to set it aside when she saw the voice memo app. The little red badge in the corner said 1 unplayed file. She tapped it. The recording started with noise. A restaurant, maybe? Or someone's living room. Voices layered over music, glasses touching. The particular warmth of a group of women who had known each other long enough to be loud. Dana recognized the background immediately. Girls' night. Tanya's place. 2 years ago, maybe a little more. She recognized Tanya's voice first. Tanya was laughing, easy and unguarded in the way she only ever was with her inner circle, the version of herself that did not perform anything for anyone. Dana remembered that night. She had set her phone down on the arm of the couch and forgotten it there, and apparently the screen had bumped against something and started recording. She almost stopped it. Then Tanya said Jordan's name. Dana went still. "I'm not waiting for a proposal to make this decision," Tanya said, still laughing, like she was explaining something obvious. "That's my whole point. If I wait, he proposes, and then I'm the villain. I leave now. I'm just a woman who knew what she wanted." Someone else laughed. Dana did not recognize the voice. "And Victor?" another voice asked. "Victor is already there," Tanya said. "Reggie introduced us at his firm's event, Reggie did not tell Jordan about that, obviously." More laughter. "That was 3-4 months ago. I needed to make sure it was real before I did anything." Dana sat very still on the floor. The recording kept going. Tanya's voice shifted, became a little more businesslike even through the warmth of the night. "Victor's been asking me about this commercial scouting data my firm has. You know, competitor property positioning, where the big clients are looking next. It's not like I'm handing him files. I tell him what I hear. He positions accordingly." A pause. "It's just business. Everybody does it." "Girl," someone started. "It's fine," Tanya said. "It's fine." The recording ended 14 seconds later. Background noise, then silence. Dana sat with the phone in her hand for a long moment. Then she got up, walked down the hall, and said Jordan's name. He listened to it once without moving. The only thing that changed was his jaw. A small tightening, almost nothing, gone in a second. "Play it again," he said. She played it again. This time he was looking at the floor. Not at the phone, not at her. Just at the floor, with the particular stillness of a man who is filing information rather than reacting to it. When it ended the second time, he was quiet for long enough that Dana set the phone down on the table between them and waited. "Can you send that to yourself?" he said finally. "From the old phone. I want it saved in more than one place." "Already done," she said. He looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition, like he was seeing her very clearly. "Okay," he said. That night, they went to bed without talking about it more. Not because there was nothing to say, because they were both people who understood that some things do not need to be processed out loud to be understood completely. The following morning, Jordan called his attorney before 8. 2 weeks later, Reggie requested a meeting. He called it a family conversation. He said he wanted to talk about the engagement, just the two of them, somewhere neutral. He was careful and formal in the way of a man who was uncomfortable but not yet sure how uncomfortable he should be. Jordan agreed without hesitation. He picked the location himself, a coffee shop midway between their neighborhoods. Unremarkable. Quiet on weekday mornings. No audience worth performing for. He arrived first. He ordered a coffee and waited. Reggie arrived 5 minutes late, which meant he had been outside for some of those 5 minutes, deciding how to walk in. Jordan recognized it because it was what he would have done himself. Reggie sat down. He had the practiced ease of a man accustomed to negotiating. Real estate had given him that, but underneath it something was working that he was trying to keep off his face. "I want to be straight with you," Reggie started. "I've got some concerns about—" "Reggie." Jordan said his name the way you set something heavy down. Carefully, without rushing. "Let me go first." Reggie stopped. Jordan wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and looked at the man across from him with the calm, level attention of someone who has organized his thoughts in advance and sees no reason to waste either of their time. He told him about the salary research, the LinkedIn comparisons run through industry tools, the months of quiet calculation that Reggie had fed his sister like intelligence briefings. He named the co-worker who had mentioned it in a building lobby without realizing what she was confirming. He told him about Victor, the introduction at Reggie's firm event, the timeline, 4 months before the restaurant, 4 months before the ring, 4 months before Tanya looked at him with that patient, pitying expression and used the word broke, like it was a diagnosis. Reggie's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. "And then there's the recording," Jordan said. He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward for emphasis. He simply told Reggie what was on it. Tanya's voice, unguarded, describing the intelligence she passed to Victor's development company. Competitor property scouting data. Positioned as nothing, just business. He let the silence sit for a moment. "That recording is with my attorney," Jordan said. "I am not coming after your family. That is not what this is, but I need you to understand something clearly, Reggie, because I think you actually care about your sister, even if you went about it wrong." He paused. "Victor will not protect her. When the consequences for what's on that recording arrive, and they will arrive because they are already in motion, he will give her name without hesitating. That is who he is. That is who you introduced her to." Reggie was looking at the table now. "She needs a lawyer," Jordan said. "A good one. Not a friend's cousin. Someone who actually handles this kind of exposure." He picked up his coffee. "That's all I came to say." He stood, left a bill on the table for both their coffees, and walked out. Reggie sat in that coffee shop for 11 minutes before he moved. Then he drove directly to his sister's apartment across town. He did not call first. His car was still in her parking lot at 10:30 that night. 11. Midnight. Her lights stayed on past midnight. The letter Jordan's attorney sent to Tanya's firm was 4 paragraphs long. It did not name the recording. It did not quote it. It simply noted, in the careful, measured language of someone who knows exactly how much weight each word carries, that the firm may wish to conduct an internal review of certain client information protocols and the handling of proprietary competitor data by current staff. It referenced a specific time window. It referenced commercial real estate activity. It said nothing else. It did not need to. Tanya was called into HR on a Thursday morning, 9 days after the letter arrived. The HR director's name was Patricia. Tanya had always liked Patricia. Professional, fair, the kind of woman who kept a box of tissues on her desk without making it feel like a warning. That morning, the tissues felt like a warning. There was another woman in the room, someone from the firm's legal department. She had a legal pad and a pen, and she used both. The questions were careful, methodical. Had Tanya ever discussed client accounts outside of the office? Had she ever shared information about competitor activity with anyone not affiliated with the firm? Did she understand the firm's confidentiality agreement and the scope of what it covered? Tanya answered each question the way she had been answering questions her whole professional life, composed, articulate, the language of someone trained to manage narrative. She said all the right things. She kept her voice steady, but she knew what they were looking for. She drove home that afternoon with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. 6 days after that first meeting, they called her in again. This time, there was a third person in the room. Victor's problems had been building longer than Tanya knew. A former business partner named Marcus Webb had filed a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Board 8 weeks earlier. Marcus had been burned on 2 separate deals with Victor. Deals where Victor's offers had arrived with suspicious precision, always slightly ahead of the competing bids, always positioned just well enough to close before Marcus could respond. Marcus had documentation. He had emails. He had a pattern that, once laid out in sequence, was very difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The board opened a formal audit. The audit moved the way audits move when the paper trail is substantive, methodically, thoroughly, and without mercy for whoever left the trail. At the same time, Dana's firm was handling a property dispute case that had been working its way through preliminary filings for 3 months. The opposing party had named Victor as a co-signer on a collapsed development deal. The allegation was material misrepresentation, that Victor had known, at signing, that the project's financial foundation was structurally unsound. Dana could not share case specifics with Jordan. Professional ethics were professional ethics, and she held to them without exception. But the case was moving, and it was not moving in Victor's direction. And the name Victor Osei was now appearing in enough separate contexts that the picture assembling itself was becoming impossible to ignore. The audit's findings arrived on a Wednesday. The board's investigators had identified a pattern spanning 14 months. Victor's development company had consistently placed bids on commercial properties with advanced knowledge of competing buyer interest. The positioning was too precise to be instinct, too consistent to be luck. They needed to know where the information came from. They asked Victor directly. Victor had already retained his own attorney by then. A good one. The kind of attorney you hire when you know the questions are coming and you want to control exactly how much of the answer you give. The attorney had spent 2 weeks constructing a strategy designed to protect Victor's remaining assets, his licensing, and his freedom, in that order. Tanya's name appeared in Victor's statement on the second page. He did not hesitate. He did not soften it. He gave the investigators her name, her employer, her role, and a clean account of how the information had been passed. Casual conversations, he said. She had volunteered it. He had not solicited. He framed it with the practiced precision of a man who had already decided who was going to absorb the weight of this and made his peace with that decision long before anyone asked him to make it. The investigator who called Tanya reached her on a Tuesday afternoon. She was at her desk. The call came from a number she didn't recognize, and she almost let it go to voicemail. Something made her pick up. The investigator's voice was polite and completely without warmth. He identified himself, identified the board he represented, and told her he had some questions about her professional relationship with Victor Osei and the nature of certain information she may have shared with him regarding competitor real estate activity. The call lasted 4 minutes. She sat at her desk for a long time after it ended. Then she called Reggie. He picked up on the second ring. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I'll find you someone, a real lawyer." His voice was flat and careful in the way of a man absorbing something he already knew was coming. "Don't talk to anyone else until then." He spent the next 6 weeks paying for it. He never said out loud that he felt responsible. He did not need to. The fact that he picked up the phone at all, that he wrote the checks without complaint, that he showed up to every pre-meeting consultation and sat in the waiting room, that was its own kind of confession. Victor stopped returning Tanya's calls 3 days after his statement was filed. She called once on Saturday, twice on Sunday. The third time, Monday evening, she sat on her couch and listened to his voicemail greeting. His voice, smooth and unbothered, asking her to leave a message, and she did not leave one. Tuesday came and went. Wednesday. She called again Thursday afternoon and got the same voicemail. This time she set the phone down on the cushion beside her and looked at it for a long time. The apartment around her was quiet, tastefully furnished, carefully curated, everything in its right place. The kind of space that photographed well. The kind of space that looked, from the outside, like a woman who had exactly the life she wanted. She picked up the phone, dialed again. Voicemail. She set it down. The morning arrived the way good things often do, quietly, without announcement. The sky outside the venue's tall windows, the pale gold of early autumn. Jordan was already dressed by 8. He stood in front of the mirror in the small back room the venue had set aside for the wedding party, turning slightly to check the shoulder seam. The suit was charcoal gray, clean lines, nothing that was trying too hard. Aunt Cora had helped him pick it 6 months ago, standing in the store with her arms crossed and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, rejecting the first two options with a single word each. No. No. When he put on the third, she had tilted her head and said, "That one." And that was the whole review. She had also made him steam it 3 times this morning. "It looks the same as it did the first 2 times, he said, holding the steamer. "Then it won't hurt you to do it again," she said, and handed him back the steamer. He did it again. Dana's grandmother's dress was ivory, with simple cap sleeves and a fitted waist that the seamstress in her aunt's neighborhood had altered from a photograph. An old one, slightly overexposed, the grandmother young and smiling in a way Dana had inherited entirely. The seamstress had gotten every measurement exact. The dress fit like it had been made for Dana in the first place, which was, in its own way, exactly true. When Dana walked into the ceremony space, Jordan stopped breathing for a full second. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the way of a man performing a reaction for an audience. Just stopped. 1 second, then started again. The ceremony was small. 43 people. Every one of them chosen. The officiant was a friend from Jordan's community college days who had gotten ordained online and practiced his remarks in front of his bathroom mirror for 2 weeks because he understood the weight of the thing he had been asked to do. He did not fumble a single word. The vows were written by Jordan and Dana separately and read to each other for the first time at the altar. Neither of them had let the other see them beforehand. Jordan's were 7 sentences. Dana's were 9. Both of them had to stop once. Aunt Cora sat in the front row, with a handkerchief already in her hand. Her toast came at the reception, after the meal, before the music. She stood up without being introduced. She was not a woman who waited to be called upon. And she held a small index card that she did not look at once. She said, "Jordan's mother was my sister. She raised that man on a teacher's salary and a set of values that could not be bought and could not be taken. And she did not live to see this day. And I am going to feel that every day for the rest of my life." She paused. "Dana, I knew what you were made of the first time Jordan said your name. He only said it once. That was enough." Another pause. "Take care of each other. That is the whole speech." She sat down. The 2 groomsmen at the head table both found something very interesting to look at on the ceiling, until they could trust their faces again. Dana's mother was not even trying to hold it together. Jordan looked straight ahead, jaw tight, and pressed his thumb against the inside of Dana's wrist, very lightly, once. Dana turned her hand over and held his. The gap between the ceremony's end and the guest's arrival at the reception hall was 20 minutes. The venue coordinator used it to reset the room, adjust the centerpieces, confirm the catering timeline. She did not notice Tanya Price come through the side entrance until Tanya was already inside. Tanya spoke first. Confident, easy, the practiced fluency of a woman who had spent years managing first impressions. She said she had attended an event here 2 months ago and believed she had left a wrap in the coat room. The coordinator, already moving in 3 directions at once, gestured toward the back hallway and told her to check the lost and found. Tanya did not go to the coat room. She drifted instead toward the entrance of the main hall, where the tables were set and the candles were lit, and the whole evening was arranged and waiting. She stood just inside the doorway, out of the direct path of the staff, and she looked at the room that had been built around 2 people she knew. She was still standing there when the doors opened and the wedding party came through. Reggie saw her first. He stopped walking. The person beside him almost walked into him. He looked at his sister across the room, her jaw set, her posture too controlled, standing in a place she had no business being, and something crossed his face that was not anger and was not surprise. It was the look of a man watching the last consequence of a very old decision arrive on schedule. He did not move toward her. 3 other faces in the arriving crowd registered the same recognition: Marcus, Keisha, and Priya. all mutual friends who had been present the night of the original breakup, all of whom had spent 2 years quietly updating their understanding of who Tanya Price actually was. Their reactions were small, a shift in posture, eyes that found each other for half a second, and looked away. Dana's mother had not been there for the breakup. She had only heard about it. But she was a woman who read rooms the way Aunt Cora read rooms, and she went still the moment she entered, her eyes finding Tanya's position in the same way a hand finds a splinter, not looking for it, simply locating the thing that does not belong. Jordan came through last. He saw Tanya. He did not break stride. He did not signal anyone. He simply walked the path that took him directly to where she was standing, unhurried, his shoulders back, his expression carrying no heat at all, only the particular stillness of a man who has already won and has known it for long enough that the knowing has settled into something very close to peace. He stopped in front of her, not close enough to crowd her, just close enough to be absolutely clear. He looked at her for one moment, one full, quiet moment in which everything they had ever been to each other passed between them without a word. The 3 years, the ring box, the restaurant, the word broke, delivered in that patient, pitying tone, all of it present, acknowledged, and completely behind him. Then he said, "I'm going to ask you one time to respect my wife's day." Wife. The word landed with all the weight of something already completed, already real. She had not been there when it became true. She had missed the whole of it. A venue staff member materialized at Tanya's elbow, quietly, professionally, without theater. She did not argue. She did not speak. She walked with the staff member to the side door and went through it, and the door closed behind her. And that was the entire thing. It had taken less than a minute. The music started 30 seconds later. Jordan turned back to the room. Dana was watching him from across the hall. She had seen the whole thing, and her expression asked him, without words, if he was okay. He gave her the smallest nod. One corner of his mouth moved. She crossed the room and took his hand. The evening opened itself up around them. The candles, the flowers, the people who had come because they genuinely wanted to be there, the sound of conversation and laughter building the way warmth builds when the right people are gathered in a room together. Jordan did not think about Tanya again. There was simply no room for her in it. She was the side door, already closed, already behind him, already belonging to a version of his life that had ended and been replaced by this one, this room, these people, this woman, beside him. The room had everything that mattered. She was not part of any of it. The first dance was to a song Dana had mentioned once, 8 months ago, offhand, in the middle of a conversation about something else entirely. Jordan had written it down that same evening without telling her. When it started, she recognized it immediately, and the way she looked at him in that moment, startled and warm and completely undone, was something Aunt Cora catalogued from her seat in the second row, with the handkerchief pressed against her face, and her smile so wide it had nowhere left to go. Jordan held Dana close and moved slowly in the amber light. Aunt Cora pressed the handkerchief to her cheek and watched them. Her smile did not move. It did not need to. The conference was in Atlanta. 3 days, 2 panels, 1 networking dinner that Jordan almost skipped because those things were never worth the time they cost. Dana told him to go. "You don't skip rooms full of the right people," she said. She was eating cereal at the kitchen counter at 7 a.m., with a highlighter behind her ear and a case file open beside her bowl. "That's not discipline. That's just pride, with a better name." He went. The networking dinner was on the second evening. A man named Charles Webb was seated 2 chairs down, senior VP at a national logistics firm, quiet in the way of people who do not need the room to know they are there. They talked for 40 minutes about supply chain forecasting and warehouse automation, and the particular discipline required to turn underperforming regional operations into something that actually moved. Jordan did not perform. He simply answered questions accurately and asked better ones. Charles handed him a card before the dinner ended. He said, "Call me when you're ready to have a different conversation." Jordan called 6 weeks later. The negotiation took 2 sessions. Jordan came prepared with numbers, timelines, and a clear account of exactly what he had built and how. He did not rush. He did not hedge. He named his price and explained plainly and without apology why it was correct. He accepted the offer on a Thursday morning at his kitchen table, with Dana's coffee going cold beside his because she had forgotten it there when she left for work. Dana made partner on a Wednesday. She called Jordan from the parking garage of her firm's building at 11:14 a.m. He was sitting in a quarterly operations review. 14 people, a projector, a regional director who talked too much. When his phone screen showed Dana's name, he stood up, said "excuse me" to no one in particular, and walked out of the room without explanation. He sat in the hallway on a bench outside the conference room and listened. Her voice was not steady. It was trying to be, but the trying was audible beneath every word, and he knew her well enough to know she had probably been holding it together since the conference room where they told her, and the walk to the elevator, and the elevator ride down, and the entire length of the parking garage until she found her car and sat down and finally let herself feel the full size of it. "They called me the youngest, and then they said—" She stopped, took a breath. "Jordan," they said first. He understood what that meant. He knew what she had built and how long it had taken, and the specific weight of becoming the first person who looked like her to hold a title in a firm that had existed for 12 years without one. He talked to her for 20 minutes. He did not go back to the meeting. They had bought the house in the spring, a 4-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard and a kitchen Dana had described as the whole reason during the second walkthrough. The nursery was the second bedroom at the end of the hall, painted a warm cream by Jordan on a Saturday in June, while Dana sat on a step stool reading him contract summaries because she could not help with the painting but refused to leave the room. Dana was 5 months along now. She was showing in the particular way of women who carry their whole lives forward with them. Still sharp, still working, still the first one with a question ready in any room, just also, now, unmistakably more. Victor Osei accepted his plea agreement on a Tuesday in February, in a courtroom Jordan did not attend and had no reason to. The terms required him to surrender his real estate license, to repay a substantial sum to the parties his maneuvering had cost, to serve a period of supervised probation. The properties he had claimed as foundations of his wealth were liquidated as part of the settlement, and the number they produced was significantly smaller than the number his lifestyle had suggested. He relocated to another state. He was, by all available accounts, starting over in a much smaller way, building carefully, or perhaps not carefully, but building smaller regardless, because the alternative was gone. Jordan learned the details from Dana, who shared only what professional ethics allowed, and from 2 industry contacts, who filled in the rest without being asked. He did not celebrate. He simply closed the file in his mind the way he closed completed spreadsheets, with the clean, quiet satisfaction of a man who had documented everything and waited patiently for the math to finish its own work. Tanya's process concluded with a fine, rather than criminal charges. Her attorney had argued, not entirely without merit, that she had not fully understood the implications of what she passed along. The firm handled her departure quietly, a lateral move on paper, a full removal of client access beneath it. The accounts she managed were reassigned. Her title stayed. Everything under it was gone. She relocated. She told people it was a fresh start. It was, but not the kind she had designed. Jordan found the original ring while unpacking the last of the boxes from the old apartment. He held it for a moment. He thought about the restaurant. The bill he paid alone. The drive home in silence. The word broke, delivered in that patient, pitying tone, by a woman who had already made her decision months before she said it out loud. He thought about a library table, 2 stacks of books, a granola bar slid across without ceremony. He put the ring in a small envelope with a short handwritten note. "I thought you might want this back. It was paid for." He mailed it to her forwarding address in the new city. He did not wait for a response. He did not think about whether one would come. He walked back inside his house and washed his hands at the kitchen sink. And that was the end of it. The baby slept in the late afternoon light. The nursery was warm and still, the cream walls holding the last of the October sun the way a cupped hand holds water, gently, briefly, for exactly as long as it could. Jordan stood in the kitchen doorway. Through the dining room he could see Dana at the table, her laptop open, a case file spread to her left, her coffee sitting at her elbow in the particular state of forgotten that meant she had been fully inside a problem for a while. Her highlighter was behind her ear. Her feet were tucked under her on the chair. She looked up. Something crossed her face, some thought, mid-formed, something she had just found in whatever she was reading, and she laughed. A quick, real, unperformed laugh, the kind that doesn't wait to check if anyone is watching. It traveled down the hall and found him before he even moved toward the doorway. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.